Welcome into the best of the week here at 5 Clubs on Golf Channel. You can also listen to us on the PGA Tour Radio Network on SiriusXM. This past week, the great historian and writer Jaime Diaz joined me in studio. Brendon DeYoung and Johnson Wagner, as they always do, with me to talk about the professional game of golf. Dan Hicks, the lead anchor for golf coverage on NBC, was with us. Cole Hammer, a new contributor here at 5 Clubs, his journey in the professional game by way of the Korn Ferry Tour. He's going to be with us throughout the year. And Paige Spiranac, one of the most influential, biggest stars in the industry of golf, join me as well. Enjoy the best of the week. Well, let's start with something that happened this weekend. A lot of people were going, wait a second, that can't be an accurate stat. Now, Justin Ray is never wrong. He is mining nuggets about things that are going on presently and historically all the time, and you should follow him at Justin Ray Golf on Twitter. He pointed out that never before had Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy both been in the top 4 on a PGA Tour event ever. And you're going, how's that possible? Well, it is possible. That doesn't surprise you, does it?
Not really, because as much as we talk about rivalries in golf, they're quite rare as far as head-to-head. Showdowns are rare, and coming out in a way that actually determines the competition is even more rare. So you have Jack and Tom Watson at Turnberry in 1977, and maybe you have Hogan and Snead in '54 at the Masters, but rarely, Seve. Not that many showdowns.
Right.
Norman and Faldo had a few. Faldo always seemed to come out ahead.
Phil and Tiger, a couple. Doral it felt like an inflection point.
Well, when they happen, they stay in your mind because they're so rare. And
exactly.
But it's not the rule at all. And I think that's sometimes a misperception about golf. There's an elite group that dominates, and they're always playing against each other. I think it was formed in the '60s when you saw Jack and Arnold and Gary Player at the Masters in particular, always coming down the stretch on Sunday. But it turned out to be an aberration. So I think the point is there's just so many good players, it's hard to separate. Now, Scottie's been incredible how often he's been in the top 5 going into a Sunday.
He's lived there.
He's lived
for the
there.
last couple of years.
Rory had his incredible start, but over time has not really been that many, contention big moments. When he's been there, it's been a huge focus, but has he actually gotten there consistently? This is not a knock, just not as often. We got spoiled by Tiger. He was always there. But again, even if you're one of the best players in the world, it just doesn't happen very much. Yeah,
the Rory thing's interesting because people are aware that he's won 27 times, but he's never had a 5-win season on the PGA Tour. And look, those things are also rare, but he is among the best players we've seen in the last quarter century. He's got 4 major championships. So it gets to something else, and that is 27 wins is a lot. Yeah. And at a time where you're talking about global depth being, it's deeper, the pool's deeper than it's ever been. I have a feeling that these wins, any win is great, but he is fighting something that I don't think anybody else is fighting, that people have confined his resume to 4 weeks out of the year. Don't you think that's going on?
I do. It comes from the territory when you're judged to be super gifted and super talented. And in his case, had this incredible start of 4 majors right away. And now he's had this dearth, a long time, more than a decade. So you start to judge him according to those 4 as, where's he going to go in history? He's been sort of, labeled as a historical player. And I think he is, just because he won so young, but he hasn't, following Tiger, there was not really a Rory era. It was a short one. And people are still waiting for that to happen. And that's unfair. And I think what happens is, when you're that good, and you've won in majors, you start getting judged by your performance in majors, because that is the moment when the pressure is highest and the historical significance is greatest. And if you happen to fail in those situations, which is nothing to be ashamed of, it happens to so many. Most players lose more than they win, even the greatest players in the big contention of majors. But Rory's have been conspicuous, and so because he's been so good and had that start, it's harsh, the way the standard they hold him to. And I think there's been a couple of precedents. I think, ironically, Sam Snead, to some extent, suffered from that. He won 7 majors, but he also won 82 times, and he was in the hunt all the time.
And specifically, the U.S. Open.
U.S. Open, didn't win it, and, Hogan would outplay him in those moments. What separates Tiger and Jack is they came through in the pressure moments so often that it made them special. And to this day, we mythologize Tiger correctly, because he just never blew a Sunday lead except Wagyu Yang, that was about it.
Yeah.
And Jack almost never as well. Rory's had a couple that have really hurt. I think of Greg Norman, obviously. Greg Norman won 2 majors. He won a lot of tournaments. He was number 1 in the world for the longest time other than Tiger Woods. And yet, we think of Tiger, we think of Greg as slightly fragile in the biggest moments. And Rory vulnerable in the biggest moments. Pinehurst kind of,
More so than I think. I thought the Open Championship in 22 was excruciating because he was the last one in, and Cam Smith's he's on a heater, and he did a historic thing by playing the way that he played. LACC, maybe a little bit more jarring, in particular the choices that he made on 14, the par 5. Didn't have a really good chance for birdie on 18. Last year, to me, was his closest episode that would remind people of the jarring nature of the way that Norman either gutted himself or was gutted. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the little putt on 16 will stay in my mind a long time. It's going to be hard to close these things going forward with that baggage. I think Rory has confronted that in a good way and said, okay, it happened, but I'm getting to be a better player. And that's all I can do. And just try to satisfy my own potential and run my own race and not worry so much about the judgment. But for someone who's sensitive to his public image and the way he's perceived and loves to please his fans, that's extra pressure too. If you're just a, kind of a sociopath about it and, you lose, okay, big deal, give me the next one because I don't care what anybody thinks. But Rory does care what everybody thinks. And I think that makes it psychologically a more difficult thing for him. But, he is a guy who, when it comes right down to it, you don't feel the security of the closing power that you did with Tiger. And again, following Tiger added also a level of expectation on Rory that's difficult. And so like LACC, there was a certain passivity to the way he played in a way. And St. Andrews as well. Even though he played well, I mean, he hit 18 greens, I believe.
Yes.
But Cam Smith was brilliant and was bold around the greens and with his wedges getting close, and Rory just seemed a little tentative. Now, some of that is because he has to improve his wedge game, and I think that's one of the things that he's learning is like, if I'm going to score, I gotta capitalize on these 340-yard drives down the middle.
Yep.
And leave me a million wedges. I mean, DJ did that. Tiger made wedges a strength. So I think he's doing that, and it's not too late. But it's made his closing power. I think it's inhibited his closing power because he just doesn't get it close enough to make a lot of birdies on a Sunday when the pressure's highest and the pins are the most difficult.
He had an awful putting weekend. If you look at his stats outside of that, he actually scrambled fairly effectively, drove it great like he always does. And I think that Pebble had people feeling emboldened about him because there was I thought there was a refinement to the way that he went around a place that doesn't allow you to hit driver with total liberty. He picked his spots, and it was great. And I'm not going to take a poor putting weekend and say, all right, we're back to square one. But I also think, and last thing before we go to a break, is this closing aspect, whether it be regular events and in particular majors, I think it's palpable. And I don't know, look, we can't examine the mind of somebody. We don't know. But I walked with him all 4 days at Pinehurst. And until he stood on that 14th tee, he had not hit one quick and left for 4 days. And then he did with a 2-shot lead. I don't know. I think people who cover the sport, I think people who want to drag him over the line, I think that it is something they can feel.
It's okay because it's the final, to me, it's the final step in being great. Can you do it at the end on Sunday? That's what separates everybody. Johnny Miller talked about it. Players resented it because it was like, oh, you're talking about choking. It's a reality. You have to handle that psychology and that stress. And he's getting better at it. And I think the fact, I remember last year, after it was over, it was like, for some reason, the thing I thought about is don't let Rory get discouraged. Don't let Rory feel like, I hate this game. Keep loving the game and keep putting yourself in there, and you'll have the satisfaction of giving it your all.
You've been very pointed in your feelings about Liv. You're not a fan, but let's get past that for just a second. Resolution, détente, an agreement, a partnership. Do you feel like we're close to all this?
All signals are, yes. And even Jay Monahan's, tone of voice was very hopeful after he'd gone to see President Trump at the White House. And it led me to believe, for someone who had to be very reticent over these years because the DOJ has been listening to everything he says. There was a freedom to it that made me think, okay, the pressure's off. This thing's happening. Let's just be patient. But all the pieces are in place. Everything that was in the framework agreement, whether it was PGA Tour Enterprises or the equity for the players, they've all happened. And he has a good relationship with Yasser, it appears. The PIF has invested the 1.5 billion, and that's under review now with the DOJ. That's all that's holding up them actually starting to negotiate. So I think 2026 looks like a year that they could have a new schedule and a new, sort of landscape for golf, for pro golf.
I have, and again, this is not based on conversations with anybody. I feel like, first of all, you've covered Tiger as closely as anybody since he became somebody, and that was well before he was a professional. He said something yesterday. He's never accidental with words. Right. And for him to say words like quickly and healing, and we need this, and the best players need to be together, I feel like we are accelerating to that place, and I think there could be some type of an announcement with maybe some detail at the players and to share stage, whether it's Scott O'Neill, the new CEO, whether it's Josh, whatever. I think that's going to happen.
That makes sense, and I think both sides need a deal. I mean, the PGA Tour needs a deal because the longer this goes, the more it hurts, sort of the engagement and the emotional attachment to the game that the fans need to have for the sport to be successful. And, the PIF needs it because they want a seat at the table. And right now, LIV is bleeding money. And, it's just time that this happened finally. And so I think Tiger, again, very measured in his comments, and it does feel imminent. In terms of that part of it, in other words, saying, okay, DOJ has given you clearance. Now we can actually get down to business and reshape the game here in a way that's profitable and hopefully, something that everyone will still love to the same extent as they loved before LIV came along.
You said the tour needs it. What does the tour need from LIV?
Well, I think the mantra is the best players playing against each other as often as possible. Yeah. And there are some great players on LIV, there's no question. Whether it's Rahm or Bryson or Brooks, even DJ if he got re-engaged. Sure.
Well,
Cam
Joaquin
Smith.
Niemann is a wonderful player.
He's a great
Cam
player.
Smith
all those guys are really good players.
Of course.
There's just no, just because they're at LIV, it doesn't diminish them in their abilities.
No.
But it does diminish their ability to show the world that they are the best. And so I think to some extent they must miss that. But the main thing is golf misses it, and golf is only good when it means something, and it only means something when the best players are, and that's why the majors have been elevated recently, and the PGA Tour always had that. Not every best player played every week, but they played often enough that was the stage. That's where you judged who was the best, and we're not totally missing it because Scotty is the best, but at the same time, he hasn't had the chance to test against all the best, and so that's what the PGA Tour needs. I don't think LIV was needed when it came on. It just brought in so much money that it became this incredible temptation. And I don't think it'll be missed if it's gone. Maybe it has a role going forward, and maybe that's something that's part of a negotiation to make the PIF feel like, okay, our thing still has some life. But as far as the necessity, I think all we need is one entity that houses everybody together. And if it's called the PGA Tour, all the better. I'm sure it will be. And that's what the PGA Tour needs.
Look, people appreciate all the stuff that you're doing. And the other night in the studio, you had some pointed thoughts about Rory McIlroy. Feedback from that in terms of the next 24 hours. It wasn't that outrageous. You were emotional. You shared your thoughts. Just the aftermath of sharing your truth about things that you were hearing from him. What was the next day like?
It was guilt-ridden, I would say, a little bit, but I got a lot of positive response from some players, from some tournament directors, from some sponsors of events that appreciated my comments. And I think the root of what I said, and I don't regret saying anything, the root of what I said was passionate about what I believed. I feel like Rory has been sounding off in the media a lot lately, and it's not that I disagree with what he's trying to say. I think reunifying the game unfortunately we're at that point, but the fact that he wants everybody just to get over it, it feels a little bit tone deaf, that we're now, because of Live and everything, we're cutting 20% of the cards away from the PGA Tour. The Korn Ferry Tour is losing 10 of their spots. DP World Tour is untouched. It's like, I think the message is fine, but for a lot of people that make their living sort of on the lower end of the PGA Tour, it's not that easy just to get over it, as he said. And going forward, I'm going to try to speak the same way, but maybe take a little bit of the emotion out of it. I think the one mistake I made was that I said he's angering me. I regret saying that. And other than that, I stand by what I said.
Yeah, Brendon, you're doing PGA Tour Live. You're down there in Ponte Vedra. I don't know if you saw this live, but when you did see it, which I know you have, what was your reaction?
I like the fact that Johnson felt that passionate about it. I know Johnson very well. He's a passionate person. He wears his heart on his sleeve. I didn't disagree with the comments that Rory made, not to the extent that Johnson did. It is because of this rival tour that's come around that we are seeing purses of $20 million now. There is the opportunity for these guys to make a lot of money. The one thing that I really didn't like about what Rory said was the way he's like, just get over it. Rory was at the start of this, Rory was the face of the PGA Tour that was saying, hang on a second, this is not happening. These guys need to be kicked off, never allowed to be back on the PGA Tour. And then just to flip it and say, you know what, just don't be butthurt. Get over it. That was the wording of his I didn't really care for either. But no, as far as Johnson's reaction, I love seeing him get mad like that. I think it's great. It shows that he truly cares. And the fact that Rory would be willing to reach out to Johnson after that also tells me that Johnson's got a voice in the game that actually really matters now. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's undeniable. It made me think, as two people who were immersed in playing the game and being as good as you could be for as long as you could be, and now turning the page and immersing yourself in this part of it, covering the game. I want you to hearken back, and Brendon, let me start with you. What was your feelings about the way golf was covered when you were playing and all the way up to being on a President's Cup team? What did you think of the televised product and people who covered the game?
Gary, I didn't understand everything that went into putting on a golf broadcast or covering golf. I thought it was simple. It was a guy out there with a camera and that was kind of it, right? I didn't realize everything that went into it, that it's a team. It's a huge team that it takes to put on a good golf broadcast or to cover this game, in a meaningful way. And since I've got on this side of it, I think that's been my favorite part of it, is being part of that team. I love sitting between broadcasts with guys, like-minded guys, and talking about a sport that everybody obviously loves and is very, very passionate about.
Johnson, I know how much you love golf. Like, you want to play. If you're not playing, you want to watch. So I know you consumed a lot of golf television when you were playing on the PGA Tour and winning on the PGA Tour. Did you always like it? Were there things about it that you didn't like?
No, I think I always had a pretty good understanding that how difficult the game is to cover. I mean, when you look at other sports, football, baseball, basketball, there's one ball in play. And when you cover golf, there's 156, or on this past weekend, there's 54 guys out on the golf course playing 18 different holes. So it's probably the most sport to produce and to televise. And I just, echoing Brendon's comments, that has been my favorite thing about getting into the media landscape, is the fact that we have teams, whether you're on the studio side or the broadcast side. It is amazing. I think more players should come take a behind the scenes look, just to have that perspective while they're out there playing, of the amount of people that it takes to make the product look as good as we possibly can make it.
Getting the band back together, you're a Sinatra guy. You're the band leader, and here we go again. This year, 2025, for people, I was talking about voices that you trust, and the fact that you and Nance have been doing this at the network level, carrying people from the winter months through the spring and summer into the fall, calling golf. This team, Dan, this is different from doing a college football game. Swimming, you may have a fortnight like you do around the Olympics and you're together, but golf is different. You get there, you hang out in the trailer. This team, these are people that are a huge part of your life, are they not?
Absolutely. I mean, I got to NBC in 1992. So what is that, 34 years now? Tommy Roy has been involved as our lead producer since then. And, you mentioned Olympic swimming and some other events. I've also done all of those events with Tommy. So we go back to 1992, and there's no replicating all the reps that you get with somebody like Tommy and the rest of the team. Tom Randolph's been back there looking at the big, huge monitor board all these years and just telling us where to go next. And I think those guys do it better than anybody ever has. Might be a little biased, but I think those guys kind of get around the golf course and give you the storylines of what's happening, as many as we can through the course of a telecast. And of course, Gary Koch and Johnny Miller and Roger Maltby through the years were just incredible partners. And we've had a real cohesiveness through the years. And I think more than any other sport, I think it really helps to have the same guys and women together. I think it shows. I think you kind of have a built-in ESP, kind of knowing what the other person's thinking, where they want to go, what they're thinking, storylines. So been incredibly fortunate to be at a place like NBC all these years, to call all the great events we have, from Ryder Cups to U.S. Opens and Open Championships now and Players Championships. It's been a dream ride, Gary. It really has.
I know you mentioned Roger and Gary. I know they're going to be part of the Players broadcast. Gary's going to do the Valspar. That's home for him right there in the greater Tampa area. Plus the infusion of younger voices, the connection to the present player with Smiley and John Wood. And, of course, Bones back in the significant role he had before going back on the bag for Justin. So the team is totally fortified. Do you remember... you're going back 92. Do you remember the first big moment you felt in golf that you had as being part of a broadcast team?
Well, I was on an outer tower for several years before I had the chance to jump up to the 18th tower with Johnny. So I have to start with my first U.S. Open in 2000 in the 18th tower. With Johnny, and it was 2000, and there was a great anticipation for it at Pebble Beach, the 100th U.S. Open. That later I incorporated that into my call when a guy by the name of Tiger Woods won by 15 shots. First time I'd been in the tower for a major championship, a U.S. Open, Pebble Beach, Tiger Woods lapping the field. So that's kind of the first time I really felt the electricity, the nerves, and everything all encompassing that makes up not only a U.S. Open, but an historic U.S. Open with a guy like Tiger Woods. And you got this feeling that as it was happening, we're never going to see anything like this again. We're never going to see this kind of performance top to bottom, Thursday through Sunday in a major championship again. And we haven't. And you had that feeling that was going to be the case. And that one stands out as far as the first big kind of surreal pinch me kind of moment.
Dan, you're, like I said, when you're a kid, you know what you want to do. So you're not just doing this as a vocation. You love television. You've got your spouse is a Hall of Fame broadcaster as well. You listen to what people are saying. What do you think in terms of the advances, the things that the viewer wants? What do you think is most important to try to provide as we head into 2025 for you guys?
I think it's to continue to tell the stories of these guys. I think that's what drives sports. I think that people have to care about the people that they're watching, and if they don't, it's really kind of a tune-out. So I think that'll never change, Gary. I think you have to tell the stories of the people that you're watching, because if you don't care about them, I mean, what's the point, right? And then you also have to illustrate the magnitude of what they are going for and put it in perspective. Like a Scotty Scheffler, that has been pretty challenging, because he has really taken the bar to a next level after what I was describing that Tiger did all those years. So, I mean, a guy like Scotty Scheffler, we're responsible for letting the audience, the best we can, know exactly what he's doing. What kind of historical perspective is this? We're going to go into the Players Championship again. He's going to try to win 3 straight Players Championship. No one had ever won 2 in a row. And that'll be one of the highlights of our swing coming up as we do 7 in a row. He's won 2 of the last 3 Bay Hills. So, he's just going to be gearing up into another run at another Masters. So I think, again, the real template remains the same, right? It's storytelling. And we can do that in many ways, you can kind of have some new bells and whistles. You kind of tell the story of the golf course that you're on. But I think it's really up to me and the rest of the crew to just give everybody a reason to care about what they're watching. I think that's the bottom line.
The story early on, Dan, has been two things in particular in my estimation. That is 7 winners, 7 different nations, but specifically Europe, making an early statement in terms of their depth. And you know where we're all headed. We're headed to a cauldron on Long Island. And I think back to you in '99 and that head of lettuce that was flowing when they sent it down to you, which was spectacular.
Not so much anymore. I wouldn't say it's a flow.
Well, you still got some flow. Luke Donald, Dan, they are bringing, I said this yesterday, they're bringing dudes. And they're not scared. I think that's an early storyline. Do you not?
I think it's an early storyline. I think you nailed it early. And we've been doing these Ryder Cups, at NBC since Kiowa, back in '91. My first Ryder Cup was '93. And you can get caught up into it a little bit. Oh, Rory's playing well and Oberg is playing well. But we're still a long way away, Gary, from the green light at Bethpage. So I think you got to kind of keep it in perspective. Even though the U.S. and even the European side has tried to kind of push the Ryder Cup captains' picks closer and closer to when they pull the trigger on that to try to get a gauge of exactly who's playing well. This game of golf is crazy, isn't it? You can be playing well, and then a week or two later you can be trying to find it again. So I think we got to be careful. I think it's definitely worthy. I think what you said is definitely might be a theme as we get closer and closer to it. But we're still a long way away. And another thing I'm looking forward to, Gary, we mentioned Gary coming back at the Valspar on the Players Championship and Roger joining him. We have 2 guys on our team: John Wood, who's now the general manager of the Ryder Cup team, and Kevin Kisner, who was named an assistant captain. So I'm really looking forward to getting their stories as we get closer. They're almost like we've got 2 guys embedded within the team. Obviously, they can't share all the secrets and all the wisdom that Keegan Bradley and company are mixing up as we get closer. But I think we're going to have a chance to really take everybody even deeper inside the team room, the strategy. John Wood's so excellent, loves the Ryder Cup. He's going to be a huge part of that team. And Kevin Kisner is going to give us that other side, right? Of what's going on in that team room. Is everybody loose and this and that? So we're going to be leaning on those guys as we get set for what I think is, one of the most, if not the most anticipated. Maybe Kiowa was very anticipated, but this certainly one of the most anticipated Ryder Cups ever. And I think it will go down as, and this is saying a lot, but I think it's going to go down as one of the great sporting events in New York history, as long as it's close. And I think we might get one of those. Yeah,
I agree with you on that. All right, let's get Dan Hicks out of here with 5 to go. 5 questions for the lead man for NBC's golf coverage. All right, for people who don't know, you can do impressions. What is your best favorite impression? And give the answer with that impression.
That is a hard one. But I will go with one of my NBC colleagues, and no, it's not Bob Costas. I think one of the most fun ones I've ever had the pleasure and the privilege to do is a guy by the name of Tom Brokaw, where, as NBC's Andrew Mitchell reports tonight, there seem to be more questions than answers.
Tremendous. All right, for people who don't know, Dan is kind of like Neil Page in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He never has any luck. So the last time you took off, landed, and then returned on time, some trip, whether it was leisure or work, when was the last time you had an on-time departure arrival in both directions?
Let's see, on-time departure. LaGuardia stepped up the game, Gary. I used to get on LaGuardia big time. I would spend back in the days when it was called Twitter, I would spend, I would just fill up my line with, it was the only way I could get through it. LaGuardia has stepped it up. I have not had a bad experience at LaGuardia in years.
Wow.
But I will say, because I mean, it's like a primetime airport now.
It's
it took
amazing.
10 years to get it.
It's tremendous.
But JFK is kind of a mess. I'm going to be absolutely frank with that. Construction on the way there, construction at the airport itself. And I had a disastrous experience there a couple weeks ago, which we don't have time to get into, but it was not good. Got turned around back to the jet and started over.
All right. The sports moment, all time, could be the call, could be the play, whatever, that anytime you see it, it either makes you laugh or smile. I know you've got a catalog of these, like, oh gosh, every time I see that, I smile. Give me one.
You know, wow. There's been a lot of great moments. I just think I was so proud of our team at the 2008 U.S. Open. I know it's low-hanging. The way we handled it when Tiger made that putt that he had to have, and we just got through watching Torrey Pines, and I was just filled with great memories again as we watched Oberg come to that same par 5 18th. So when Tiger made that putt to join Rocco in the playoff on Monday, that stands apart. It really does. It was that special.
I thought maybe you go Jason Lezak. I'm telling you, Dan.
That's true.
The hysteria of Rowdy Gaines makes me smile ear to ear when I hear it every time.
I'm going to change it to Jason Lezak. You're absolutely right. I got in the golf mode here, and I didn't really look outside that bubble. The Jason Lezak scene was absolutely something you couldn't even write in a million scripts out of Hollywood. It was that good.
No, not at all. All right, you and your wife Hannah Storm's favorite joint. I'm talking about a place that the vibe is great, the food matches it. What is your most reliable joint for you guys to go and know that they always deliver? Is it in Greenwich?
Very easy answer. What do they say about real estate? Location, location, location. We have a place that is literally 5 minutes down the road called Louie's in Coscob, on the edge of Coscob. I don't know if you've been there, Gary. If you haven't, you got to make your way over. It's kind of like a Cheers. We go to the bar. We don't make a reservation. We go right to the bar. They know us. They get us in there, and the food is excellent each and every time. Louie's of Greenwich, Coscob is the call.
All right, very good. Last thing, your favorite hang in golf, where is it?
Wow. I got to go for that nostalgia thing again. And since we were talking about Roger Maltby earlier on, Morton's in Orlando. It is the flagship Morton's. Roger and I, along with Jimmy Roberts and a couple other guys, have probably been to more Morton's than anybody in the history of mankind. And the place that started it all, right down the street from Marnie's place, Morton's flagship all-timer.
On Sand Lake Boulevard in
on
Orlando,
Sand Lake
Florida.
Boulevard, baby.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And let me start with this, as somebody who has wanted to do this basically his whole life. This is not something you woke up when you were 18 and said, I want to do this. You played in the U.S. Open when you were 15. And in a young life like yours, junior golf and going to junior tournaments, their parents present, and then you go off to college and you're with the team and you travel together and you practice together. Now you're doing this as a professional, and it can be very lonely. What has loneliness at times taught you about you?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. In junior golf, family members, parents are traveling with me, and all junior golfers for that matter. And then in college, you have a built-in team and a support system. So you're not making, plane flight reservations, hotel reservations. You're not renting a car on your own. All of that's kind of done for you. And, obviously that changes when you, decide to put professional next to your name. And, it's taught me a lot. Luckily, I still, am traveling with a really good friend of mine, Nick Costello, who's my caddy. And so I've, dodged the loneliness, bullet, a little bit in that sense. But actually, right when I turned pro, I traveled the whole summer, by myself, and that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. I learned, what kind of makes me tick as an individual versus with a team. When I was in college, I used to hate getting up early. I used to hate plane flights, and now that's completely flipped just because I'm making that decision now. Like, I'm totally a morning person. And if you had told me that when I was 18, I wouldn't have believed you. So I try to get my practice rounds in early, and now I love people watching at airports, and flying is a great time for me to decompress. So, there is definitely some loneliness out there, but there are perks to, being independent as well.
You told me when we were on the phone a little bit over a week ago that you now love traveling. Why do you think that is?
I do. And like I said, I didn't really enjoy it, in college. But now it's become one of my favorite hobbies. Growing up in Houston, I obviously traveled for junior events and whatnot, but we're typically traveling to Florida or Georgia, places with warm climates, and not traveling that far. And since turning pro, I've been lucky enough to kind of globetrot, kind of just in North and South America. Haven't made it over to Europe as a professional yet, but I've seen some incredible places and meeting new people and seeing cultures that, I wasn't familiar with growing up. Immersing myself in a culture where English is not the primary language, and having to figure out, how to get around and just kind of adapting to the environment that I'm in. And then I am a huge sucker for natural beauty. And so, whenever I'm near an ocean or in the mountains, so, in Panama a couple weeks ago, right on the ocean. And then, in the middle of the summer, we go to Denver, and I like to go hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park. So I'm not afraid to get out and be adventurous when I go to these places, just because, I might not ever find myself back there and golf is a great excuse to get me to these places. So, I've fallen in love with it.
I heard something and read it, and then read it again from Patrick Rogers, who was, heading into the final round out there in San Diego with a chance to win. And he said, I want to go out tomorrow and not play with the expectation, but play to achieve. And I'm like, God, that is awesome. And expectations are important, but I think sometimes expectations can make you resentful about other people, about things. The idea of going out and achieving things, do you generally try to have a certain state of mind, especially when it comes to competitive round? Where do you want your mind to be when it's time to go?
Yeah, I watched that video a few times from Patrick. I think it was super insightful and something that, I actually relate with. I had I guess a pretty decorated amateur and junior career, and I was kind of, in the spotlight early on, just having qualified for that U.S. Open when I was 15. And so there were expectations that came along with that. And I didn't really know how to deal with it. I think expectations are great, and kind of flashing forward to now, I think expectations are for yourself, and like process expectations are really important, because if you don't expect, the highest level of discipline or responsibility from yourself, then, those goals, probably will be out of reach. But if you're playing to meet your other people's expectations for outcome, I think it's very limiting. It's almost playing to lose versus, pushing forward to trying to do something great, which is, I think, what Patrick means by achieving. So basically on a daily basis, I expect, I expect myself to work hard and be in the right space mentally when I'm going into a shot, over a shot, before a round. And, I'm just, and then at the end of the day, am hoping that it'll lead to great things. But if not, at least I can hang my hat on the fact that I gave it my all. So yeah, it's fun having the opportunity on the Korn Ferry Tour to go out and try to earn my PGA Tour card. In a perfect world, that happens at the end of this year, and I'd be over the moon about it. But I'm not gonna set an expectation that I have to do it, because that's just perfectionism at the end of the day. And as we all know in golf, that's pretty much unachievable. And so I expect to believe in myself. I expect to, work hard. But at the end of the day, I'm just trying to push towards achieving my goals.
The fact that somebody who is in the industry of golf, who's not the #1 ranked player in the world, can go down Radio Row at the Super Bowl and everybody wants to talk to her, speaks to your popularity. Was that in any way overwhelming, or were you like, God, this is a ton of fun? No, this is not exhausting.
It's so funny. When I started doing this almost 10 years ago now, I never thought that I would be in this position. And I am so incredibly blessed to do what I do. I have the most amazing job, and I never take it for granted. And so walking down Radio Row and talking to everyone, it was so exciting. And I just have these pinch me moments where I'm like, I can't believe that I get to do this. This is my job, and I'm so lucky that I have the community that I have that supports me.
Paige, a lot of people may know your background, but let me share a little bit. Look, you come from a family of high achievers. Your dad played on a national championship college football team at the University of Pittsburgh with Tony Dorsett, 1976. Your mom was a ballerina. Your sister was a track athlete at the collegiate level. Obviously, you were a college golfer. Do you remember at a young age having a competitive bent, that you naturally were competitive, or was it the environment that you felt like you needed to be just to kind of survive the household that you were growing up in?
I've always been really naturally athletic, and I come from a big sports family, and so it was just a part of our everyday lives. But I didn't really have the competitiveness of, my parents or even my sister. But sports came relatively easy to me. Even when I was in preschool, I was hanging on the jungle gym and the monkey bars. And so that's why I got put into gymnastics, because I was just throwing my body around everywhere. And I've always had the physical ability to compete at a high level, but the competitiveness and the mental fortitude to be able to compete at that level, I never had. And so that was something that I always struggled with, because I could do it, but with my mind, it wouldn't allow me to compete at that highest level, which was always something that was a little bit difficult for me.
You mentioned gymnastics, and you were a very good gymnast. You dealt with some serious injury, and then you narrowed the focus to the game of golf. Do you feel at a young age that you were more confident in gymnastics than you were in golf, or was it the other way around?
I was never a really self-assured, confident little kid. I was unbelievably shy, very introverted, and I just had a lot of physical ability to be able to do these things. And so when I quit gymnastics, I fractured my kneecap twice, and I just didn't really love it. It is unbelievably challenging. At 10 years old, I was in the gym 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it was just exhausting. And so I first tried out tennis. My aunt was a professional tennis player after gymnastics, and I was like, you know what, that's not for me. It's a little too physical after gymnastics. And so my dad, who isn't the biggest golfer, but just thought that my just who I was as a person would fit the game of golf, since it is an individual sport and I could just kind of be on my own. And I fell in love with it right away, and I picked it up very quickly and started competing, within less than a year. And I wanted to play pro. I didn't even want to go to college. But again, the mental aspect of golf, which is the most challenging sport when it comes to, being mentally tough, was so hard on me. And I just could never do it when the pressure was on. And it was just so frustrating, because I love the game. I loved practicing. I worked so hard at it, but then it was go time and I would be holding the club on the first tee and be like, what is this? I don't know what I'm doing. Like I would absolutely crumble. And so I would say gymnastics was probably easier because there's less time to think and you're more reactive, but I loved golf so much more than gymnastics.
How did you handle when you got to that level where you achieve in college, you guys win a conference championship at San Diego State, you turn professional, you have some good moments, but you face what all athletes do, some sooner than others, and that's your own mortality as an athlete. Did you manage that? Did you manage it fairly well? Did it take time before you made what was your pivot to the next chapter of your life? Did you struggle with that at all?
I mean, absolutely. I finished out my college career at San Diego State and I didn't love it. I really struggled throughout college just with my relationship with the game of golf and competition. And so I took about 2 weeks off and I said, I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a break. And I was talking to my parents and they just said, let's just give it 1 year. Let's try to play professionally for 1 year. Problem was that I didn't have the financial backing to be able to play professionally. And so I was running junior golf clinics and caddying. And after I played the Colorado State Open, I looked at my phone. I was getting a ton of notifications from my friends and they were like, hey, you're going viral right now. And this was at a time when this wasn't normal. Now
Right.
You have people going viral every single day. But back in 2015, this was unheard of. And so I went from having 500 followers to 100,000 followers overnight. And my life completely changed. And I then had all these new opportunities. And because I was struggling financially, I was like, wait, I can leverage this to finance my golf career. And so that's how my media career started and also my professional golf career. They started at the exact same time, which was a lot to handle because there was no playbook of how to handle viral fame. And especially when you're, 21 years old, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what I was doing with life. And now you have all of these eyes on you while I'm also trying to navigate playing professional golf for the first time, which I also have a very complicated relationship with. And so I did not handle it well, to say the least. Constant breakdowns. It was just a lot to deal with. And there was no one who had done this before me to look to seek advice. And so I was just really figuring it out as I was going. And so after a year of playing professionally, I couldn't handle it. I was doing both of them. I wasn't doing either of them particularly all that well. It was also hard to deal with a ton of negativity around my golf game. And I took that very personally. And so I said, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of time off. I'll lean into media and just see how that feels. And maybe I can make some money where I can stop doing that and then lean into golf full time and play professionally. And a couple weeks of not playing golf professionally, I was like, okay, I'm going to do media full time now. I'm much better suited for this. I'm significantly happier. And I think that this is the path that I should go down, which I'm so happy that I'm able to do what I love every single day. But there is some heartache of putting your head on the pillow at night and going, I want to play golf professionally, but I failed at that. And that's just something that I have to come to terms with and something that I deal with, every single day still.
It's interesting for you to share how quickly, literally overnight, the level of attention you were getting. And look, everybody's ego to varying degrees needs to be massaged at times. And it's great to get attention. It's different to be watched, which I think at times people like yourself probably feel that. And also with attention, Paige, as you know, comes resentment. And that resentment, you can start to hear that. You can feel that. What has that been like, and how have you adapted that and managed levels of resentment that I know you've experienced over the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years?
Yes. So when I first started doing this, I was met with a lot of resentment and hate because it was something that was different. And I came into this with a brand that is not everyone's cup of tea. And so majority of the attention that I received was negative attention. And so I had to fight that for years of my career of trying to prove who I am as a player, but also who I am as a person, because my character was often questioned because of what I loved to wear. And I think that actually, upon reflection now, I think that is why I've had such a long lasting career in media, which doesn't happen too often because of, people going viral every time. There's always someone new that you can watch. It's because I did come up with a ton of hate. It's so much easier to let people get to know you and they learn to love you in a way. And so the last 10 years from going from everyone feeling like they hate you to actually being more positive year after year after year has really helped me. I think it's hard when you come into doing any type of social media and you were beloved right away, because there is going to be a point where you're not the cool, the popular, you're not authentic anymore. It's so much harder being loved in the beginning and then learning how to deal with hate, where I learned how to deal with hate very early on. And now I'm actually getting positive feedback. And it's like, this is fantastic. And not saying that my journey was ever easy. It was very difficult. And I think if you look back, I struggled with how to deal with that and what to say and what not to say and what to do and what not to do. And ultimately, I just learned that, not everyone's going to like you, and that's okay. And as a people pleaser, that's really hard for me to come to terms with. But that's what's so fun about social media, is that there's so many difference of opinions. And I think that I have so much more support than I do hate. And I always just try to focus on that.
With all this opportunity, which you have a lot of, comes choices. And one of the choices you've made is to align yourself with this content creating council with the PGA Tour. And I'm sure when you started this, you went, at one point I'm going to be giving advice to the PGA Tour. And now here you are in this collective, people who have voice, who have an audience. Where are we with that? Have you guys gotten together? Give everybody an idea of the impact that this council can have on the overall product and the ancillary things around the PGA Tour.
It's so crazy that I'm a part of this creator council. When I first started doing this, it wasn't cool to do social media in golf, and it was kind of looked down on. And so for the progression of golf social media to get to where it is today and to have this role is such an honor. And I'm so excited. We've had a couple meetings and there's things that we're working on that I am so excited to hopefully be able to share soon. But it's been just awesome to be able to be with this group of people where we all just want to really grow the game of golf and create entertaining, fun content for golf lovers. And I think that we're going to have a big impact, and I'm excited for what we can do.
You and I, and you probably won't remember this, we had one small little conversation in the Morning Drive studios some years ago. And Paige, I'll never forget, one of the things you said to me was, I'm finding my voice. And you clearly have. And that is a reflection of a lot of things, one of which is confidence. Your relationship with Bryson DeChambeau, your willingness to be critical of him, and then finding common ground and sharing space and doing things that people consumed. What is finding your voice taught you about you?
That's such a great question. And I've been on such a journey of self-love and self-discovery over these past 10 years. And I think it had to be sped up because of being in the public eye and being so criticized and scrutinized for, everything that I was doing in the golf industry. And it really came down to self-love. When I first started doing this, like I said, and prove that I was all of these things. And I just realized that I won't make every single person happy. And so I've really had to learn to love myself and also love what I do. I have a community that gets my content. And even though that's not for everyone, I'm not trying to always appeal to everyone. I think that's where creators go wrong, is that you want your content to appeal to every single person. And I've just found my community that gets my sense of humor. And at the end of the day, what I've realized is that this is not so serious, and that's okay. I think there's so much pressure on being taken seriously. And now it's like I create silly, fun content. There is so much bad in the world that when people come to my page, they're going to see something that's going to put a smile on their face. And if it's silly and it's not that serious, then that is okay. That is the goal. And just coming to terms with that is something that I think has really helped me. And it's okay if people don't have the best opinions or they like what I do. As long as I put a smile on at least one person's face, then I feel like I'm doing my job. And I always try to remember that with every single piece of content that I put out. And that's also come with being less criticizing players and people, and because I've been through it. And so, for example, with like Bryson DeChambeau, supporting him and being a place where I can uplift others and use my platform for good. And like I said, just put a smile on someone's face is all what I'm trying to do every single day.
All right, let's get Paige Spiranac out of here with 5 to go. Like she said, it's about fun, a little levity to end with her on this Wednesday. All right, tell us, Paige, the current show you're binging or consuming on a regular basis. What show are you into right now?
I have one episode left of Yellowstone, and that has been consuming my life.
Very good. I'm done with it. I don't think you will be dissatisfied if you've consumed all of it, which I think you did. All right, the last day you didn't spend a moment on social media.
Oh my gosh. Maybe when I was 15 and I didn't have a cell phone.
Like when you go on vacation, you can't just totally unplug?
You know, it's my job and I'm always connected to my work. And so I am always connected to social media, which means I'm always working.
All right. The city or country that you've never been to that you either know you're going to this year or you're determined to get to?
I've always wanted to go to New Zealand. I've never been there, and I've heard that they have amazing golf courses. I don't know if that's going to be on the list this year, but that is for sure on my bucket list.
All right. And then would you rather get up really early or be forced to stay up really late?
Really early all day long. When it hits 7 p.m., I get excited because I'm like, okay, I only have like an hour and a half, 2 hours until I can go to sleep.
Amen. Preach, preach. 8:30, I'm like, there's no reason to keep the lights on.
I'm like, I want to go to bed now, but it's not socially acceptable, so I got to stay up just a little bit longer.
I honestly think after 7, it's acceptable. All right, last thing, the food item that makes you queasy to either hear just the name, smell it, or see it.
I am pretty good with food. I'll eat almost everything except for mushrooms. I am just not a big mushroom girl, which is weird because my favorite food is a corn dog, and I think most people would find that more grotesque than a mushroom, but yeah, not a big mushroom fan.
We hope you enjoyed the best of the week here at 5 Clubs. Watch us Monday through Wednesday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Golf Channel and simulcast on the PGA Tour Radio Network on SiriusXM. We'll see you next week.